Hello there. Just a sec. Good afternoon, and welcome to Brunch Time with Maiyegun. There's no much singing and all that, okay, this afternoon, because we usually don't really get busy, all right? So, but we use the opportunity of our brunch time these days just to read the history of events, the events that happened in Nigeria that then can be classified as the history of the contraption. So if you have a chance of joining me this hour, I'm going to say thank you, because you can listen to this like you are listening to a podcast, okay? And the first thing you should try to do is to share the broadcast, okay? And you can go by with your own daily routine. So it is brunch time with Maiyegun, and that is the mix of breakfast in America, lunchtime in Europe, and even in Africa. And we will be reading another book. This time around, this is called Blood on the Niger. Okay? It is the untold story of the Nigerian Civil War, all right? And you know the popular saying that if you want to hide anything from a black man, he said, go and hide it inside a book. He's never going to open it. We also have people who are, you know, I don't know what to call them, but I call them the pretentious bookworm. The people that will buy any book and every book just for decoration purpose only. You walk into people's homes, right? And you're going to see the pile of books. They don't open them, they don't read them. And the reason why the criminals in Nigeria have been able to get away with a lot is because the supposed heroes past, they are not really heroes. Most of them are a bunch of criminals that were never tried for their crimes, okay? So on Maiyegun's Diary Political, we have a segment dedicated for reviewing the past. It is, Nigeria is a place where as they usually say, that the victors are those who write the story of war. Therefore, they usually have to praise themselves, praise themselves to heavens. But if the animals are allowed to, if animals can write and are allowed to write their own, history or stories, they will never glorify the hunter. That is another saying. So yeah, if you happen to see this broadcast this hour, okay, this is Maiyegun, and this is Brunch Time with Maiyegun live. So I will read, and you can listen, or you can even be part of it by adding your own comments and what have you. So the next 2 hours, which is the next 120 minutes, will be myself reading from this another piece of the dark past of Nigeria. And no matter what we have heard historically, different versions of history of Nigeria, there's something that is very much alive, and that is we have never learned from any of our history. We've never learned from it. And that is why today, successive regimes in Nigeria, they continue to perpetuate the same agenda that led to the bloody genocidal war, where people who have nothing in common are forced together to stay together and try to make it work. So here is the version of Emma Okocha. We've had an opportunity of reading the history of the Nigerian Civil War, and that is called the Why We Struck. This is to set the record straight that the supposed first Nigeria coup wasn't in any way Igbo coup. We have had people who have run with that false narrative for years. So finally, we have a clarity on what really happened. Okay? The first coup in Nigeria was never Igbo coup. And at the same time, the bloody genocidal war of Nigeria was never started by the Igbos. See, the reason why this have to be cleared is that those who perpetrated this genocide, they were never punished. Rather, they were rewarded. They were greatly rewarded. Some of them became head of states, right? Became ministers, became very powerful, rich people. Some of them have monuments, national monuments named after them by their friends that took over power. And they ensured that this history is never taught in schools. Because when they begin to tell the true history of Nigeria, a lot of you are likely going to agree with us. That's why did they have to force us together? It's obvious that we do not have anything in common, all of us. So why did they force us together? And why do we keep forcing ourselves together? In whose interest is the continued existence of this contraption under these arrangements? So that's why they don't want you to know about the history, right? And I'll keep reminding us, there is no one Nigeria. What you have is many Nigerias. You just need to find where you belong. Yeah. And till eternity, this contraption is never going to work in anybody's interest except the interest of those who happen or have an opportunity of grabbing it, right? Grab it, snatch it, or run with it. For your own benefit, of course, not even to the benefit of your own people. And that is why till today, there is no Nigerian leader or anybody who has emerged as leader in Nigeria that has succeeded in lifting his own people out of poverty. Not a single one. From the north to the east to the west to the every part. Not a single person who has taken a shot at the leadership of Nigeria has been able to lift his own people out of poverty. Rather, they've contributed in dipping them further into that poverty. And that is how it's going to remain. When you have it, your shots, turn by turn, Nigeria Limited, right? You can enrich your own families and enrich your own, your friends and the rest. And then when you are done, another person will grab it from you. Do the same, another person to the next person and to the next person. The existence of this contraption is never in the interest of the inhabitants, unfortunately. But the earlier we know that, the better. So if we don't learn from history, we are bound to repeat the history. So this is a piece of work that is 164 pages, long. It comprises it contains the important events that took place, right? Even right before the emergence of this contraption called Nigeria, before and after. So, brethren, if you have a chance of watching this today, thank you. Like I said, what you have to do, you don't really have to sit there and engage per se, even though I would want you to. Or you can just listen to this broadcast like you are listening to a podcast. Okay. So let's get started. Number one, we start with the dates. It's called dates that matter. So in 1875, the Church Missionary Society, CMS, established Christianity in Asaba. In 1884, British Treaty of Friendship and Peace with Asaba Kings and Queens. 1886, the Royal Niger Company established government in Nigeria with capital at Asaba. Territories stretched from southern to northern Nigeria. Government assured protection for British chartered trading companies and European missionaries. In 1889, first central mosque established in Asaba, Cable Point, the first in southern Nigeria. In 1897, Laura Shaw coined the name Nigeria from River Niger. The 1st of January 1900, end of the government of the Royal Niger Company, Sir Frederick Lugard hoisted the Union Jack in Okocha, military headquarters. Sir Ralph Moore hoisted the Union Jack in Asaba, civil headquarters. On January 6, 1914, the amalgamation of the Southern Army of the North and Southern Protectorates. In 1917, Jacob Oyemem, the first Nigerian linguist, visited Paris, spoke Latin, English, French, and Italian. On the 6th of January 1920, Father Paul Emechete of Ezi ordained in Asaba, the first African priest. January 25th, 1920, Reverend Andrew Asieku ordained pastor by the Anglican Mission. December 21, 1921, return of Dr. Uwadie Martin to Isele Oku, first Nigerian to graduate from an American university, first African U.S. commissioned officer. On October 11th, 1924, the death of Okocha Umpagu Ata, the lion that devoured his friends. April 1st, 1929, Southern Nigerian headquarters transferred to Enugu. On the 26th of February, 1937, the birth of Chuma Nzeogu. 1949, Undoka Eze successfully mobilized Nigerian workers against the colonial government. June 1952, Ogwachioku, meeting of the leaders of Benin province, addressed by the residents, Mr. HLM Butcher, and chairmaned by the Oba of Benin. A motion for a separate central state was moved by JIG Oye and seconded by FH Utomi. On the 5th of May, 1956, Agbo Community Center hoisted the inauguration of the Midwest State Government. The 12th of April, 1958, Winikis Minorities Commission released report and left Nigeria. In October 1960, Rosemary Aneze Onicha Olona proclaimed Miss Independence. On March 22nd, 1962, the Prime Minister, Sir Tafawa Balewa, seconded by Chief F.S. Okotiebo, moved a motion for the creation of Nigeria's fourth region. July 16, 1963, referendum result was 89% in favor of the Federal Republic of the Republic, turning Nigeria to a republic. On the 4th of January 1966, the last public appearance of the Prime Minister honored in Asaba after the commissioning of the £6.5 million. January 15, 1966, first military coup. January 19, 1966, Major Chukuma Onzegu, under escort by Colonel C.D. Nwawo, stepped down for Irosi's government, left Kaduna for Lagos. July 6, 1967, outbreak of the Civil War. July 29, 1967, the death of Pesike Nzegu. August 9, 1967, Biafra invaded the Midwest. September 18, 1967, the Federal Army recaptured Benin. October 5th, 1967, Asaba fell to the Federal Army. October 7, 1967, Asaba massacre. April, Easter 1968, Ibusa, second military operations. May 2nd, 1968, the sack of Ishiagu. January 15, 1970, end of the Nigerian Civil War. March 1976, Chief Osan of Umunede, Christian the Igbo-speaking area of the West Niger, Anioma. Now remember, this is the untold story of the Nigerian Civil War from the part of the Biafra, right? This is not the history of Nigeria generally. This is what you were never possibly told or partially told, or you've partially read about the Civil War. So let's get down to it. They have, hang on, I think he has read it to the foreword and all of that. Now let's read the foreword, okay, which in itself emphasis on the Asaba massacre. So the foreword was written by Chief P.C. Asiodu, the Zoma of Asaba, the member General Gowon's War Cabinet, 1966 to 1970. Here said, at Asaba environs, from October 2nd to 7th, 1967, horrible massacres were committed by federal troops. Hundreds of men were slaughtered as a result of cold, deliberate planning. Men of all ages, mostly promising youth in their prime, as well as teenagers and septuagenarians, were shot in cold blood. The massacres were militarily unnecessary and were unprovoked, as the Midwest was already reconquered from Biafran troops and Asaba was firmly in the control of federal troops. They were absolutely contrary to the war aims of the federal government and to the code of conduct issued to the Nigerian army. The great tragedy is that the massacres awakened in Igbos across the Niger the worst fears about genocide and seemed to confirm Biafran propaganda. They strengthened the Biafran resolve to continue the war and were therefore a tragic turning point in the Civil War. For so long, the truth about the massacres has not been told in any details. It is necessary to tell this truth partly in homage to the innocents who fell and partly in service to the nation by excising from its conscience any lie about the critical events of its history, to enable it grow and to make sure such wanton fratricide never reoccurs. Emmanuel Okocha's Blood on the Niger is more than timely. His account of the tragic events at Asaba, Ibusa, Ogwachioku, Ishiagu is succinct. The tone is matter of fact and the narrative is based on a long painstaking research with first-hand sources. In dealing with what was a most traumatizing personal tragedies for practically every family in the old proud town of Asaba, including his own family, Emma Okocha is to be praised for his courage in telling a story so long suppressed and for his skillful discipline in avoiding exhibiting any strong emotion which the horror and drama of the event could easily have ignited. The Nigerian nation is still in the making, and Okocha's book is commendable for the sad story which it tells, and because it provides a timely warning of the awful tragedies which an absent-minded handling of our continuing national political and social crisis could still engender. In this context, historical national amnesia is an unavoidable luxury for those who forget or do not learn from history, tend to repeat history. And that is from Chief P.C. Asiodu, a member of General Gowon's War Cabinet, 1966 to 1970. Here is a preface and acknowledgement. This was written by Emma Okocha himself from Cable Point, Asaba. So in quotes, he wrote, "It must be remembered that we have only heard one side of the case. God has written all the books." Samuel Butler, Apology to the Devil. Pale, in the preface to his once celebrated Principles of Moral and Political Philosophy, remarks that when a writer offers a book upon a subject on which the public are already in possession of many others, he is bound by a kind of literary justice to inform his readers specifically on what it is he professes or he expects to improve. One of the somber results of the last Nigerian Civil War was the great number of civilian casualties arising from the activities of both the Biafran and Nigerian soldiers following the collapse of the Biafran invasion of the Midwest and the return of the federal troops. The carnage at Asaba, Ishagu, Ibusa, part of Undokwa, and Ogwashi Uku have been given historical accommodation, albeit sketchy. In the prison note of Noble Laureate Wole Soyinka, in his book, The Man Died, Soyinka described the Western Igbos as the most vulnerable Nigerians, especially ever since the Midwest invasion. In Biafra, if they were not pinning away in refugee camp, the Western Igbo youths were repeatedly, without training, thrown in as cannon foders into the unbalanced war. It is intriguing that many who have given accounts on the war have failed to tell us what exactly happened to these people in the days and months after the Midwestern state changed hands from Biafran control to the federal command. Blood on the Niger is therefore meant to put in historical focus the events that led to the violent changes in the social economic relations of the Western Igbos with their neighbors, the war damages, the killings, and advance likely reasons why the event happened. In the end, a balanced account that accommodates the tragic events of those hairy days will go a long way in presenting a more comprehensive view of the Nigerian Civil War. In the final analysis, curiosity was the principal motive that led to this project. As the chief correspondent of the Nigerian News Agency in Niger State and the Abuja Capital Territory in 1978, I found myself more interested in military reports and war mementos than prescribed news beats. In many cases, I had abandoned my job and was frequenting the Midwest states, conducting personal researches on the war. The news agency discovered I was not fully committed to my job and transferred me to Lagos. Lagos was my gold mine, and I spent more time with retired military officers of both the Nigerian and Biafran armies. It was in Lagos in 1979 that I met General Ike Nwachukwu at the Nigerian Port Authority Tennis Court in Surulere. The general was the brigade major that preceded Colonel Ibrahim Taiwo's 7th Brigade of the Federal 2nd Division that finally flushed the Biafran army out of the Midwest. In Lagos, I also talked to Colonel R.T. Trimnell, former Nigerian Army Supply and Transport Commander, who was commanding the Benin garrison when the Biafrans struck. At the same time, it was not always a happy interview. I will never forget my meeting with Dr. Okeleke Nzeogu. I had started looking out for Major Nzeogu's brother since my first visit to their mother at Okpanam in May 1982. I caught up with him in the US, where he is teaching business at the University of Maryland. It was clear that the trauma of Nzeogu's death remains with his brother to this day. His comments, in quotes, "I have been bombarded by journalists and writers before. Obasanjo wanted me to contribute to his book. I did not, and I will never budge on that resolve. My mother can talk to anybody. I cannot stop her, but my brother's death is so sensitive that what I know, I keep to myself." At Onitsha, Olono, I spent my 1986 Christmas with Colonel C.D. Nwawo, formerly in charge of the Midwest 4th Area Command, and Colonel Mike Evenso, one of the commanders of the Biafran forces, talked with me. There were other Nigerian Army officers who talked ex cathedra. Let me hereby, with great appreciation, acknowledge the courageous contributions of on-the-spot eyewitnesses and other very informative sources, too numerous to mention. In this category is Chief F. Odiatu, a former district officer with the Bendel state government. On the intellectual plane, I record my appreciation to Professor J.C. Edozien, former personal physician to the head of state, who was at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. In the same vein, I remember two young communication professors, Professor Raymond Akule and Ike Ndolo of George Mason and Howard Universities, respectively. Professor Akule, incidentally, is the youngest brother of Eugene Akule, the late senior medical officer at Asaba during the war. I express my gratitude to my family, particularly Messiahs S.O. Okocha, Hilary Okocha, and Dr. Austin Okocha, who in their multifaceted support gave science to my study. So gratitude also to my teachers, this and that. That's just the acknowledgement and preface. So let's go to introduction. Yeah. War narratives are very interesting, dramatic, and intellectually stimulating. As long as those accounts abound, man must continue to read them. The book, Blood on the Niger, contains very revealing information that have filled many gaps in previous works of the Nigerian Civil War. Almost 30 years after the war, one of the questions continued to slap us on the face. Who will ever tell us where and how Major Chuma Kaduna Nzeogu finally fell? No other book on the Nigerian Civil War could reveal the full stories leading to the death of the soldier who changed the history of the Nigerian nation when he struck on the 15th of January, 1966. There are other questions. What exactly happened to Colonel Victor Banjo's expedition across the Niger? How many other plots and personalities were involved in the Midwest operations? No other narrative could be more authoritative in revealing the undercurrents leading to the decisive clash between the federal forces and the Biafrans in their Midwest operations. Blood on the Niger is the courageous work of a restless genius. In this sorrowful account of author's penchant for intellectualism, his blood-curdling researches, presented with the spike of a war correspondence, continue to impress. His balance sheet analysis, immensely benefiting to his targeted area of inquiry, should be wisely discussed, digested, and incorporated as the main pivot of the Western Igbo platform of interest. It has been said that the mimicking of humanity abound in this universe. While imitations may be the highest form of flattery, what will be the reaction of the subject of this work if it were impossible to record those bloody events at Asaba, Ibusa, Ogwachioku, and Nishiagu? The question before man must be, when will man learn from history? The lone voice in the wilderness continue to sound the message of peace through the dim corridors of time, but man's brute nature remains deaf to that call. Man's inhumanity to man continues in spite of civilization and religious evangelism. This book, Blood on the Niger, has made a commendable contribution to the understanding of African conflicts for Nigerians and Africans as a whole. What is the remedy against vindictiveness, pestiferous intolerance, psycho-spiritual bankruptcy, masochism of and parasitic opportunism? We can hope that humanity will someday build a new civilization on the foundation of peace, divine love, and fraternity. When that will be achieved, there will be in human societies a new way of life, new awareness, divine consciousness, and new ideas. Until then, let's stick together and fight for a place under the sun where there is no ethnocentrism, exploitation, narrow-mindedness, exclusiveness, and behavioral negativism. This is from Professor Chike Onwuachi, Special Advisor to Malcolm X and Pioneer Director, Institute of African Studies, Howard University, Washington, D.C. Now, I think we begin the reading now. Chapter 1. Give me a sec. Thank you very much for joining me. Like I said, and we normally sort of do, you don't have to sit there to watch. You can be doing your stuff by just listening. It's like listening to a podcast. So this is a piece of work by Emma Okocha, an Untold, is Blood on the Niger, an untold story of the Nigerian Civil War. So chapter 1, the Midwest and the Gathering Storm. Here is a quote. It is a peculiarity of federations that contending units usually referred to as states coexist, cooperate, coordinate, and coexert. No one single unit should be in a position or even in a combination with other units numerically or resource-wise to dominate others. K.C. Ware, Theories on Federalism. Sir Tafawa Balewa orders the Midwest referendum. Following the Midwestern people's open demonstration for a region of their own, out of the then Western Nigeria, the late Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, in February 1963, appointed Edward Lunge to supervise a referendum in the Midwest area according to the people's wishes. The result of that referendum, held on July 13, 1963, showed an overwhelming 579,007 of a total of 650,130 registered voters voting yes. With an estimated population of 1.5 million, this mini Nigerian entity had in 1963 an estimated population of 250,000 Igbos, 80,000 Ijos, and greater number of Edos and related groups that were dominant. Dennis Osadebe, an Igbo from Asaba, was on August 12, 1963, appointed administrator of the new region with chiefs Humphrey Omo Osagie and Edo and James Otobo and Yorubo as deputy administrators. On the transfer of all civil servants of the Midwest region, Midwest origin from the former Western Nigeria to Benin, it was clear that the bureaucratic control of the administration swung far to the Western Igbos. The influence of the Western Igbos diluted within the larger Western Nigeria civil service became concentrated in Benin. Out of 12 permanent secretaries, 9 were Western Igbos. Of all the 9 doctors available in the health ministry, 8 were Igbos, namely Doctors Patrick Ofili, J.B. Azinge, Nicholas Azinge, Matthias Obiaya, Francis Ogea, Eugene Akule, R.O. Nkiaka, and Ngozi Alana. The General Hospital in Benin became known as the Kedu Hospital. During the interim period, the justice of the region was administered by the Lagos High Court. All existing Western laws continued to apply in the new region till amended. Following a general election with a National Council for Nigerian Citizens, victory. Sorry, I think they were the ones who won. So it said, following a general election with a National Council of Nigerian Citizens victory, Chief Osadebe became the first premier of the region. Subsequently, Justice Chike Idigbe, an Igbo like Osadebe, was appointed the first Chief Justice of the Midwest. The Midwest policy of neutrality. Even though the Midwest government, like other states within the Nigerian Federation, was overthrown by a coup led by another Western Igbo, Major Chuma Nzeogu, on January 15, 1966, the bureaucracy remained an exclusive preserve of the Western Igbos. Lieutenant Colonel David Ejo and Yoruba was appointed military governor. It was the cardinal principle of his government to keep the Midwest strictly independent of any outside influence. Colonel Ejo's policy won him suspicion from Lagos, while Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegu Ojukwu of Biafra cultivated his friendship. This policy posited the then Midwest as the safe corridor, guaranteeing security of lives and a peaceful environment for all the contending parties before the shootout. Supported by the Army headquarters with Brigadier Eyo Ekpo as Chief of Staff, there evolved a high-level meeting of top Nigerian Army officers dedicated to finding a solution to the crisis. Benin, the capital city of the Midwest, served as the neutral venue. The regions were represented thus: the West, Colonel Olufemi Olutoye and Brigadier Adeyinka Adebayo; the East, Brigadier Yu Imo, Colonels Philip Effiong, Eze, and Ude; the North, Colonel Martins Adamu; the Midwest, Colonels C.D. Nwawu, Mike Okwechime, S.A. Nwaje, and Major Samuel Ogbemudia. So the primary focus of the meeting was for a peaceful resolution of the Nigerian civil strife through dialogue. Towards this end, the following pre-summit agreement was drafted thus: 1. The Midwest to be maintained as a buffer state, guaranteeing everybody within it some peace and freedom from molestation. 2. None of the participants to violate the agreement reached in the meeting. 3. The human and other resources in the army to be determined. 4. Arms acquired by parties in conflict, recruitment and strength of the opposing armies to be checked. 5. Colonel R.F. Trimnell, a Midwestern Igbo, was appointed the moderator. So 65 Yoruba soldiers enlisted in the Nigerian army. So in those regular meetings, it was discovered that the strength of the Yoruba soldiers then enlisted was only close to 65, unknown to General Yakubu Gowon. The Easterners were paying their soldiers, while the Easterners were regular at the meetings, the other parties exhibited lesser commitment. Finally, the peace meetings were jolted by an inconsequential occurrence. A Western commander driving from Ibadan was stopped by one of the soldiers for flying a pennant in his car. The embarrassed Western commander went straight to his Nigerian counterparts and made a case of harassment and, without any regard to the meetings, without any regard to pleadings to return to the peace table, stopped attending the meetings rather. The northern group also stopped coming. The Easterners continued and made available their papers on their recruitment, their armament, their salaries, and after 1 week without seeing the others, stopped coming to the conference. Except the outlines, there were no further communication with the feuding parties. So then the 4th Area Command and the independent state of Belita. With the abandonment of the peace conference, the Midwest started preparing to defend itself. The 4th Area Command under Colonel Conrad Nwawo decided to seal the Niger Bridge with metal, and in consonance with the state policy, the troops at the bridge were to assume a command. The northeastern sector was I'll take that again. So with the abandonment of the peace conference, the Midwest started preparing to defend itself. The 4th Area Command under Colonel Conrad Nwawo decided to seal the Niger Bridge with metal, and in consonance with the state policy, the troops at the bridge were to assume a defense posture, supported with all available resources. To command the northeastern sector was Colonel Henry Igboba. So other commanders include Southern Sector, Major Philip Afiegbe, a highly educated and certified linguist. Western Sector, Major Okechukwu Ochei. Hamory, Major Samuel Ogbemudia. Training, Colonel Alphonsus Kechi, who earlier served as the Commandant's Defense Academy, Kaduna. All these officers reported to Conrad Nwawo, who reported to the military governor, David Ejo. At this stage, the Midwest request for arms went through Lieutenant Colonel S. Nwaje, who was detailed to seek arms from Lagos, while Major Ogbemudia went to Kaduna, seeking support weapons and ammunition. The federal government reacted with a lot of suspicion and granted very little arms to the Midwest. Meanwhile, the blockade on Biafra exposed the Midwest to activities of smugglers across the Niger. The economic relations between Midwest states and Biafra indeed entered a booming era. So the Midwest was flooded with Biafran traders cutting away fuel, essential commodities, and food items. The Midwest government, therefore, instituted a task force to check this trade across the Niger. It was feared that at the rate the smugglers were operating, the Midwest was going to be affected by the activities of the task force. There was no guarantee that each time permission was granted to some Western Igbos to trade in those essential materials, that these materials would not find themselves across the Niger. Permission to friends and relatives usually was an extension of business to Eastern traders who would tempt these Western Igbos to any length to get those goods across the Niger. The Niger was at that time busy with all sorts of water transport, ferrying cattle herds, cars, salt, and groceries to Onitsha. Those were the links. They blocked the river. They blocked the river Niger, could not cut off. On the political level, the Midwest, at the September 1966 ad hoc Constitution Revision Commission, inaugurated in Lagos by Lieutenant Colonel Gowon, maintained its independent stand for the continued preservation of the Federation. Alone, its delegates stood for continued coexistence of the Federal Republic with a strong center. Aware of its precarious position in the collapsing days of peace, the Midwest embarked on other contingent measures to strengthen our position as follows. 1. All the northern soldiers guiding the military governor's office and his person were later replaced by returnee Midwest soldiers. 2. Arms and ammunition were sought for in Lagos and elsewhere. The government also ordered a shipload of arms. This ship bound for Warri Port was confiscated at the Iberian Peninsula by the Interpol on a tip-off by the federal authorities. So much was the concern among its leaders of thought that in the event of federal breakup, they reasoned that the Midwest should not be cut hands down. There were suggestions that a new independent state of Belita be declared for the Midwest states. Bereft of enough arms, the 4th Area Command remained a defensive force, mounting roadblocks on our boundaries with the North and the West. A metal sea erected on the Niger Bridge, guided by a platoon of soldiers, served as the only defensive fortification against the East. So here are the adjoining notes added. Said 89% of the electorate registered yes in the plebiscite under the 1963 Nigerian Constitution. An affirmative 60% of the area's electorate was necessary before the issue could go before the regional and federal parliament for approval. So 25 years ago, there was not one Nigerian officer in our armed forces. The highest ranked Nigerian was a regimental sergeant, Major Lieutenant Ugboma, has the distinction to be the first Nigerian to be commissioned officer in 1949. See Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe at a luncheon organized by a committee of friends in Patterson Hall, All Saints Cathedral, Onitsha, November 16, 1975, in honor of his 70th birthday. So also commissioned next were Lieutenant W. Bassey, Nigerian Army 1, JT Uaguyin Rossi, and S.A. Ademulegun, Lieutenant R. Shodende, and in 1950, and Lieutenant Willington in 1952, a history of Nigerian Army. These are just adjoining notes, so not really the thing. So Operation Torch, Chapter 2, the Biafran invasion of the Midwest. So this is another quote. In times of war, when each party could always count upon an alliance which would do harm to his opponent and at the same time strengthen his own position, it became a natural thing for anyone who wanted a change of government to call in help from outside. And that is Thucydides, pioneer Greek military historian. So US Embassy and the Midwest invasion. Amidst heavy downpour under the cover of an ink-black darkness, a Biafran assault company on August 9, 1967, landed at the John Holt Beach, Asaba. Now, let me give you a bit of explanation, okay? You see, in 1963, right, the people of Midwest of Nigeria, okay, they decided to not be part of the Western Nigeria anymore. So they are called for a referendum to create the 4th region at independence. Nigeria had 3 regions, which were the North, the East, and the West. So Northern Nigeria, Eastern Nigeria, and Western Nigeria. So the politics of that time created a bit of bad blood, just to really be honest, that it was like important to them then that they don't want to be part of the Western region anymore, because the Western region of Nigeria used to be, the government of the Western region used to be to as far as, today's Edo states, Delta states, you get what I mean now? And, like that far. So, but the 1963 referendum now, which according to the history, the population of the Midwest part of Nigeria was around 1.5 million people. So over 700,000 of them participated in that referendum, right? And more than 60% of them voted yes, that they wanted to become the fourth region of Nigeria. So that was when the fourth region of Nigeria got created. And then you had the north, the east, the west, and the Midwest. So from this history, the Igbos of the Western Flock controls most part of the Midwest at the time, all right? To the point that even their civil service was mostly dominated by the Igbos. However, they even have their own place, called the Anioma as well. Anyway, when the coup happened 3 years after, and the governor was appointed to be in charge of the region, Midwest. And it was like almost irreversible that there was going to be war. It's known by the federal authorities then. So the negotiation for peace between the Biafrans, led by Maiyegun General, the Nigeria, other part of Nigeria, which includes the north, as well as the west. So they consider the Midwest as a neutral ground. And it's like a sacred land that the federal authority must respect that place. The Biafrans must respect this place. So it's like we can't go to the east to have this peace meeting. We can't go to the west. The Igbos don't trust the west. We can't go to the north. They don't trust the north. So the only place where it seems that everywhere it should be neutral, the neutral ground, is this newly created region. And therefore, all parties were supposed to respect that. But that changed when the war started. That's the chapter 2 now. All right. So Operation Touch. The Biafran invasion of the Midwest. So the US Embassy and the Midwest invasion. So amidst heavy downpour, under the cover of an ink black darkness, a Biafran assault company on August 9, 1967, landed at the John Holt's Beach, Asaba. In a matter of seconds, the post office and the catering rest house, standing some few meters up the landing beach, were secured. The unit commander, while disconnecting all communications lines, suddenly blew his whistle. With that signal, the green light for Operation Touch, the Biafran invasion of the Midwest had started. Critics alleged that senior embassy officials held up reports to Washington. The most spectacular were reports that the Midwest was to be invaded in early August. An urgent telegram sent to the American embassy on July 27, 1967, from Asaba said, "You have until John Vianney," which my source said meant that the invasion was likely on August. The information was not reported to Washington because it was unfavorable to the federal military government and also contradicted the conventional wisdom of the day promoted by the British High Commission that any Biafran thrust would be northward. The source said, by early hours the following day, the metal-sealed bridgehead at Asaba End had been smashed through. With a ready understanding and collaboration of elements of the Midwestern 4th Area Command, the Biafran main force of the 101 Brigade, in a lightning blaze, found into the Midwest, and by cockcrow had overrun Nigeria's 4th state. One of the commanders of the Midwest 4th Area Command in Asaba, Major Alabi Isama, was awakened from sleep at the catering rest house by Lieutenant Okocha of the invading forces. Major Alabi escaped arrest by shooting his way through and headed straight to Agbo, where he tendered his report to his commander, Colonel Henry Igboba, who in turn called Beni. Colonel David Ejo instantly informed Lagos the same night. However, the Biafran force was unstoppable, and by dusk, Warri, Auchi, Beni, and the rest of the region have fallen to the Biafrans. So this is one thing about history. In this book, written by Adewale Ademoyega, one of the soldiers, Nigerian soldiers, that invaded Midwest, which is the Nigerian Fourth Region, categorically said the invasion of the Midwest was not done as for Biafra. Okay? It wasn't like a Biafran army per se. According to them, they were arrested, locked up in jail in what was then the eastern part of Nigeria. So when Ojukwu freed them, and then Victor Banjo, they asked for Ojukwu's support that they could still take over Nigeria. Remember, they were the guys who planned the coup, all right? So when they were freed during the war, Ojukwu was begged to let them go and they can take back Nigeria. All they needed was one, take over the Midwest, then take over the West. And once they take over Lagos, the next is going to be to take over the North, and the coup can still succeed. But historians keep putting it like the Biafrans invaded the Midwest. But the truth is that the intention was not to make the Midwest part of Biafra. You know? The intention of these guys who planned the coup of 1966 before they were arrested and put in jail was that they were believing that they could still actually take over Nigeria. All right? And Ojukwu gave them their blessing, gave them his blessing until everything blew up on their faces. The federal forces returned. Well, let me continue with this version. So Oba of Benin accept the presidency of the Republic of Benin. The surface objective of the operation was to secure the Midwest and proclaim the Republic of Benin at once. The Oba of Benin was to be made president with shared powers going to the Olu of Warri in the evolving participatory government. This significantly was to dispel any fears of domination from any of the region's tribes. In the same arrangement, the Western Igbos would produce the commander of the Midwest Army. The Oba of Benin, Oba Solomon Akenzua, was persuaded and he accepted to head the presidency of the Republic of Benin. So, however, the January 15, the unfinished revolution, you see, they didn't call themselves coupists. Ademoyega, Unzeogu, and others, they didn't call themselves coupists. They called themselves revolutionaries, right? So, here said, however, a second plot emerged on the way because the commander of the invading force had other objectives. Colonels Victor Banjo and Emmanuel Ifeajuna believed in their unfinished dreams of January 15, 1966. They believed in Nigerian unity and were opposed to any form of secession. They were not in support of Biafra. Victor Banjo, Emmanuel Ifeajuna, Adewale Ademoyega, Unzeogu, Kaduna Unzeogu, they were all one Nigerianists. So when these guys were jailed in the eastern part of Nigeria, and this Biafra secession happened or announced after the return from Aburi, right? Upon return from Aburi, the Aburi Accord was not for the Biafrans to break up from Nigeria. The Aburi Accord was more or less like saying, yes, there is now the abolished regional system, but the Igbos in the eastern part of, in fact, the eastern Nigerian government, they will remain independent of their own, which means they are still part of Nigeria, but they are not under any military ruler at the center. It is like an autonomous region. That was supposed to be the arrangement. But historians told us that even though Gowon and Ojukwu agreed, when Gowon returned back to Lagos, the Muritalas of this world were like, are you mad? How could you go and agree to such? That was what led to the Biafran secession to say, okay, if you are not going to honor that arrangement, then the Biafrans will actually have to go now. Meanwhile, from the 1966, January 15, 1966 coup, there were soldiers arrested, suspected to be part of the coup. Not even suspected, knew to be part of the coup, except Victor Banjo, that was wrongly accused of being part of the coup. So they were locked up in jail, which now fell into the part called Biafra. So Ojukwu released them. So by the time Ojukwu released them, Nigeria was already at war, which means the Biafra were already living, or they've left. However, Victor Banjo, Emmanuel Ifeajuna, Adewale Ademoyega, who called themselves revolutionaries, they still believed in Nigeria. They don't believe in secession. So they went to Ojukwu to say they could still kind of like get Nigeria back on track instead of the Biafrans to leave. And they were the leaders of the invading army. Yeah, with some Biafran soldiers, weapons, and all of that. They needed that to continue their revolution, is called. We will continue our revolution. Remember that the arrangements that Midwest is a neutral ground, they were not part of it. This was an arrangement between the then leaders of Nigeria, Gowon, as well as the leader of the Biafra, Ojukwu, the leader of the Western Nigeria, Adekunle, what's his name again? Anyway, as well as the leaders of the Midwest, Ogbemudia and Co. That Midwest is a neutral ground. But the January 15 coup revolutionaries, they were not part of it. So when they found some handful of soldiers, weapons, the first place they attacked to claim in their drive of trying to regain Nigeria for their revolution was the Midwest. It is called unfinished revolution. Even though history continued to cause havoc, hatred among the people of these regions, the Igbos, the Benin, the Midwesterns, and all of them, who were told that the Biafrans were coming to dominate them. There was nothing of such. There's nothing of such, right? The Midwest is partly owned by the Igbos as well. There were Igbos of the Midwest who were not part of that, the full, Eastern region. But today, you will see some people hating on themselves, attacking themselves. The Igbos want to dominate us. The Biafrans came to come and take over our land. No, the Biafrans didn't come. Ojukwu was not interested in Midwest. It was these revolutionaries of 1966 who believed that they could still rescue Nigeria. Let's continue. So they believed in Nigerian unity and were opposed to any form of secession. Their objective was to secure support from the West with the ultimate goals of marching down to Lagos and Enugu, sacking General Gowon and Ojukwu simultaneously, and enforcing peace on their own terms. To this end, Free thoroughfare and logistical aid was demanded by Colonel Banjo from Ibadan. In one of his many desperate telephone calls to Colonel Olusegun Obasanjo, commander at the Ibadan garrison, he offered Colonel Obasanjo any price for his cooperation. Wole Soyinka, in The Man Died, ominously described the stop in Benin with this touching cry. Victor Banjo, if ever a revolution was lost to history, not now in one of those famous moments, but by days, one full span of 24 hours, then two, then a third, even after the fifth, the chance had begun to slip away. By the end of a week, it was gone forever. Another lost cause. What kept him? What kept him in Benin while the naked underbelly of Lagos lay helpless in his gross inert corruption, waiting only to be pierced? I can guess at the answer, but that is no consolation. Waiting for a first sign of the active support assured him by those who were not, however, driven by an equal idealism. Banjo forgot that is a nation of fence-sitters, that in crisis, established power begins by an advantage which exerts a psychological paralysis on all, but the most uncompromising few. Because he had publicly declared his invading force against the Eastern Secession, Banjo imagined that his was sufficient answer to the dilemma of the waverers. And so speeches over the radio, long meetings with civil leaders of the Midwest, long telephone conversation with supposed comrades in arms in other parts of the country. The revolutionary base, supposed to be consolidated by his continued presence in the Midwest, began to crumble away. He paid it with his life, and with him, Alale, Ifeajuna, Agbam. Meanwhile, Colonel Ojukwu procrastinated on the proclamation of Republic of Benin as scheduled, to the consternation of the Oba of Benin. Rather, he invited the Oba of Benin to Enugu. The select Midwest group in that plan advised that the Oba of Benin cannot leave his palace unceremoniously. What then was Colonel Ojukwu's plan in invading the Midwest? Writing in the New Nigerian of July 21, 1982, Nwane Kerendu observed that it was His Excellency's Special Brigade, the S Brigade, privately recruited, trained, and nurtured by Ojukwu, that infiltrated the Midwest. It was to overrun the Midwest, head straight for Ore and Ibadan, cut off Lagos before the outside world would wake to reality. That was the plan. The Special Brigade put together, led by this Banjo, Ifeajuna, and Adewale Ademoyega. It didn't work. Frederick Forsyth, in his Biafran story, asserted that Colonel Ojukwu hoped that an alliance of two of the three southern regions would swing the West into agreement and force the federal government to negotiate. Whatever were his exact goals, it was clear that Ojukwu veered from the original plans hatched with his select Midwest collaborators. While the latter wanted a republic and continuous independence from the contending parties, Ojukwu was anchoring for a southern tandem. An alliance of the South would probably force the North to the negotiating table. Hence, the appointment of a Yoruba as commander of the 101 Brigade. Finally, his interview with the African Guardian of November 13, 1986 is very instructive. In quote, "The stop in Benin was the beginning of the error. My plan for that operation was that by 5:30 in the morning, the Biafran troops will be in the peripheries of Lagos, with mortar being fired from every direction." Now, Chief Obafemi Awolowo saves the West. So here is another paragraph. That stop, indeed, was the pattern of the lightning offenses of the invading army, which by August 13, 1967, was encountering some federal forces on the Ore axis. The federal authorities needed those crucial days and the stop to recover from the shock assault of the invading brigade. Banjo's frustrations and inability to secure the West can be explained by Chief Awolowo's conception of the war. In his address delivered to Yoruba leaders of thought at Ibadan, Wednesday, August 16, 1967, Chief Awolowo declared, "Since the recent coup in the Midwest, a massive propaganda offensive has been mounted by Enugu and directed against the sons and daughters of Odudua. We have been asked, among other things, to shake off the shackles of Hausa Fulani oppression. Enugu and recently Benin have promised us full military support to this end. It is not denied that 5 years ago, some Yoruba leaders allowed themselves to be used as pawns on the chessboard of two crafty players, each of whom erroneously believed it was his destiny to dominate the Nigerian peoples. For the best part of those 5 years, the Yoruba people knew neither peace nor contentment, nor happiness. Since January 1966, however, the crisis which was imposed on the Yoruba people of Nigeria has spread with increasing venom to other parts of the Federation. What the rebels in the eastern and midwestern states are now asking us to do is to allow the waves of Holocaust with which the areas temporarily under their control are afflicted to be reflected back to Yoruba land. We will do nothing of sort. On the contrary, the urgent task to which we shall now bend all our physical, mental, and spiritual energies is to make it impossible for a single rebel troop to set foot on an inch of Yoruba soil." Chief Awolowo's sagacious and prompt declaration saved the West from the terrible ordeal of civil strife, thereby enabling it to escape the devastation suffered by the Midwesterners in the hands of the invading Biafran troops. And with that timely master role, changed the tide of the war. The New York Times, as quoted by Okon Ojigbo in his book, Muritala Muhammad, As I Knew Him, revealed that during their occupation of the Midwest, the Igbo Easterners and local members of their tribe abused their powers. Where they found northern Hausas, the temporary conquerors were reported to have exerted brutal vengeance. Members of other smaller Midwestern tribes, the Benis as well as the Urobos, were also reported to have been maltreated. Further, in his book, The Reluctant Rebel, Fola Oyewole, an officer in the Biafran invading force, noted that, in quotes, "Troops of the Liberation Army did not behave in a manner likely to improve their relationship with people of the area they occupied. The worst hit towns were Warri, Sapele, and Benin. Men of the 18th Battalion based in Warri were notorious, looting anything they could turn into cash. Abandoned commercial houses were indiscriminately broken into and emptied by looters. Vehicles, bags of salt, and provisions of all sorts were favored commodities. Some of the things were either sold on the spot at giveaway prices or sent to Biafra to be sold later." In his own testimony, the divisional commander of the federal forces, Colonel Muritala Muhammad, observed that families were completely massacred, including small children. Their deaths were caused by their refusal to give food to retreating Easterners. With so many plots and subplots within the Biafran High Command, added to the suspicion from the Midwestern people, a reaction to the proven cases of Biafran soldiers' brutality, it was not long before Operation Touch boomeranged. With Biafran reverses on the battlefield, the political climate in Benin was charged. All the decisions taken earlier were discarded, and a political struggle between the administrator and commander of the brigade struck the army in Benin, with little movement on the western axis. As the situation was getting out of hand, the Republic of Benin was hurriedly declared with one Major Albert Okonkwo, a medical doctor without combat experience, emerging as the administrator. Obviously, Ojukwu turned down persuasions from the commander to appoint an administrator. Colonel Trimnell, the garrison commander in Benin, or any other non-Igbo officer to allay the fears of the other Midwesterners. The administrator, by and large, moved his headquarters from Benin and was on a daily shuttle from Benin to Enugu. The Colonel Mike Evenso, commander of the 12th Battalion of the 101 Brigade, wrote, the objective of the Biafran regime was at variance with the objectives of the commander, Victor Banjo. For example, after the 12th Battalion had captured Auchi and exploited further beyond Auchi and Okene, my next line of action was either a kind of hook toward Okocha or a left flank towards Ilorin. The objective would be like forming a wedge for the north. That was my position until I was invited by the divisional commander, Brigadier Banjo. He gave me a roughest edge of his tongue, with his fingers caressing his pistol in his belt. He lambasted me for taking Okene and ordered I should pull back to Auchi, and we did. Which we did. Of course. So the declaration of the Republic of Benin. As the retreat continued, the Biafran administrator for Benin, Major Alberto Okonkwo, was almost captured alive in Benin during his horrid attempt declaring the Midwest states as Independent Republic of Benin, ROB. Apparently, he was not aware of the federal thrust to Benin from Auchi on September 20, 1967. That declaration came too late. The Midwesterners at that point in time had made up their minds where to go. The speech declaring the Republic. They've got all of this, the handshake that changed the tides. This is what it's called, the handshake. Man, look at them. Awolowo. What is this one? M.I. Okpara. Yeah, they said M.I. Okpara says surprise tour of the West shows the late premier of the Eastern meeting with Mrs. Anna Awolowo on the far left. C.O.S. Benson, Afghan Power, Obafemi Awolowo, the Ashiwaju welcomes the Northern administrator. So Awolowo was called Ashiwaju. And with the chairman, Colonel Usman Kassina, on the 29th of August, 1967. So the West cannot be used as a battleground, Awolowo said. Then you have Dennis Osadebe, NCNC champion Dove, opens up with late Premier of the North, Amadou Bello, back there. So this was like the kind of, let me see if my camera can pick that up. So there they were, those men, and how the whole thing changed, right? Anyway, let's continue. So, where are we? Right, they said the speech declaring the Republic of Benin as an autonomous, independent, and sovereign republic was tapped at Asaba and was taped at Asaba and taken to Benin for broadcast. 24 hours later, the first batch of the 2nd Division of the Nigerian Army walked into Benin on September 21, 1967. With the fall of Benin, the new Republic of Benin needed money to operate in exile. The permanent secretary in the then Midwest Ministry of Finance, Stephen Chukwu, instructed the transfer of some £2 million from the Central Bank in Benin to the African Continental Bank in Nasaba. This amount was later used to set up the government's temporary office at the government school at the township, where fleeing civil servants from Benin and Warri were paid their salaries. To combat the refugee problem, a welfare office was also set up. Asaba at that point in time became the de facto capital of the failed republic, as the administrator was living and had his office at the textile mills. When the federal troops finally took Asaba, the rest of the money was taken across to Biafra for the settlement of many refugees from the Midwest. So that was the end of the chapter 2. Now, chapter 3. The federal response. One second. So in quote, another quote. Sometimes a writer chooses to leave a chapter out of a book. The fact is, no matter how strange or scandalous, the sunken chapter always travels to the surface. Henry Paul Veros, the shortest day of the year. On August 11, 1967, after the Biafrans had secured Ore and made some moves towards Owo and Okitiwukwa in the west, General Yakubu Gowon announced full military operations to crush the Ojukwu rebellion. It is now clear that what happened in the Midwest was a military coup of Igbo officers of the Nigerian army stationed in the area. Less than a month after that announcement, the 2nd Division of the Nigerian army captured Benin, the Midwest capital, on September 21, 1967. Apparently, the pincer movement that emanated from Auchi finally closed in on Benin from behind. The famous commander of that victorious force did not hide his objective when, in a terse voice, he declared over the Midwest radio, quote, "My dear brothers and sisters of the Midwestern state of Nigeria, on behalf of Major General Yakubu Gowon, head of the federal military government and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, I, Lieutenant Colonel Muritala Muhammad, do hereby officially confirm liberation of the Midwest state of Nigeria, Les Agbo and Asaba, from the hands of the rebel soldiers. My destination is Onitsha. Brothers and sisters, let nobody stand on my way, for anything that stands on my way will be crushed." That was Muritala Muhammad. So Muritala Muhammad and the city of blood. The entry of the federal troops into Benin opened up the Pandora's box. For the first time since the events in the north, the Igbos fell prey to a city whose pseudonym of City of Blood has long been recognized by its rich history of war and empire building. The city stuck out as the only southern city to witness large killings of Igbos in such numbers that attracted the ire of the commander. Disturbed by these developments, Colonel Muritala Muhammad called Chief A. Yusufu Eke, a member of the Midwest Leaders of Thought and Paramount Benin chief, and emphasized that if such attitude was going to be the result of Nigeria's history, then there was no need to continue the civil war. Midwest Solicitor General, Mr. Giwa Amu, writing in the Sunday Observer of March 16, 1983, described in the following text what happened to the Igbos, most of whom were Western Igbos, and as such, never for once believed they were unsafe in Benin, their regional capital. For record purposes, however, let me state fearlessly that I saw hundreds of unarmed civilians being shot at sight in Benin City when federal troops arrived to liberate the city from rebel soldiers. In quote, "There appeared to be a fleeting period of lunacy in which Midwesterners gladly identified their Igbo compatriots to be shot down by federal troops. On the so-called day of liberation of Benin City, federal troops surrounded the house of the then Chief Justice of Midwestern State, the Honorable Justice Chike Edigbe, with a view of capturing him for an undisclosed purpose. But unfortunately, Chief Justice Edigbe had moved out of Benin City to his hometown, Asaba. As the chief law officer of the state, I protested vehemently to Ogbemudia, who had been appointed the military administrator of the state, about the killings of unarmed Igbo civilians in an effort to keep Nigeria one. Colonel Ogbemudia's reaction was immediate. In his own broadcast reproduced in the African Spark, Volume 3, number 22 of the 1975, he said, in quote, "The great and spontaneous demonstration of joy with which you welcomed the Federal Army gladdens my heart, but I will not want you to mar your joy by paying the Igbos in their own coins. Anyone found looting will be severely dealt with. Unnecessary harassing of defenseless citizens should stop, and no one should take the law into his hands. Manhandling of suspects will be an offense." Off quote. Nobody can really ascertain how many Igbos lost their lives in the Benin debacle. By the time a measure of order was established in the city, Regans marched into the Nigeria Institute for Oil Research and Wood Treatment factory at the outskirts of the city and stoned or clubbed to death scores of unsuspecting Igbo workers in those locations. At the Ekpoba River Bridge, some local youth organized themselves into vigilantes, and fleeing Igbos were decimated on the spot and thrown into the river. It was this kind of mob that attacked Benin hospitals and prisons where Colonel Henry Igboba was detained on the orders of Colonel Victor Banjo. That mob left the prison with Henry's head severed from his body. At the General Hospital, Mr. Bigman Owaje, telecommunication engineer disguised as a woman, was having a nap. His assistant manager alerted the troops after presenting him as a saboteur. Mr. Nwaje, still masquerading as a woman, was killed on his hospital bed. He was a big man because of the way he celebrated life. He was the first Nigerian to ride on the French-made Citroën of the highest class. During the world middleweight title fight between American Gene Fullman and Dick Tiger of Nigeria at Ibadan in 1963, Big Man displayed and almost seized the headlines from the world-renowned boxers. Beside the training camps, he entertained the Ibadan people by automatically lifting the arch side of his car and taking his time before restoring ground balance, courtesy of the tradition of the Citroën special effect. Ibadan had never seen this type of trick. They were really entertained on the night of the fight. The fans ushered him in beside the ringside seat of Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, the president. When he returned from Ibadan, he ordered for the newest make of the Citroën. It was this same car he rode into a hospital when the federal troops landed in Benin. It was later learned that Colonel Igboba, a prominent officer among others, that quelled the January 15, 1966 coup in Lagos, was never forgiven by Colonel Banjo on the approach of the Federal Army. This officer, who refused service under Biafran command, was abandoned to the frenzy of a charged civilian mob, who, following the sudden turn of events, declared the Igbos enemies. Igbo Akiri changes to Igbanke. Meanwhile, the 2nd Division rode on. At the borderline village between the Edos and the Western Igbos, former Igbo Akiri village changed its name to Igbanke. That village is the hometown of Colonel Ogbemudia. At Agbo, the people came out and declared to the federal commander that they were not Igbos. The federal commander ignored the Obi, whose name was Ikechukwu, and continued his march towards Asaba. At Owa, the wise Obi, Efe Zomo, caged the lion, installing Muritala Diodogu of Owa Kingdom. Now, this idea, let me say something here. You see, after the war, the people started a kind of a mob, organized mob attack, looking for Igbos to kill. So it got so bad. It was so bad, right, that people started denying that they were Igbos. Majority of the people you will see today in a place called Niger Delta in Nigeria today, more than 80% of them were actually Igbos. But they had to start changing their names. Some changed their names, some outrightly denied. That didn't stop them from being killed, though. But the idea of people saying they are not Igbos, they are this, they are that, changing their history, trying to change all their background and everything. All of this started from the moment, right, that the federal troop gained entrance. And remember, you know, the Igbos were blamed for the actions of the supposed Biafran soldiers, followed by the revolutionary Nigerian soldiers who thought they could keep Nigeria one. So the Igbo civilians, they were blamed for that, right? Because they said these soldiers, these Biafran soldiers that invaded this Midwest, created this bad blood of, so you guys were here, you disrespected our Oba. Ojukwu has no respect for our own Oba. and then all of you are treating us like you know what I mean, like you are above us. You know, there was no record that the Biafran soldiers killed anyone, any civilian like that. Oh, there was no record of that. But the fact that they said they maltreated them, like treated them like piece of shit and all of that stuff, right? So when the federal soldiers came, some of these tribes in this region, they formed a bond. They were pointing the communities. They were pointing their neighbors. They were Igbos. They were saying, "Is Igbo, is Igbo." So openly, in the open, they were being shot and killed by these soldiers, the federal troops. They were killing civilians that way, to the point that it became so common that the civilians themselves, they formed vigilante, and they were going after the Igbos. They were going to prisons, they were going to hospitals, they were like killing us, any Igbo they saw. So the hatred started from there, that many of those who are in this delta, in part of Benin, those who are in all these rivers, Akwa Ibom, all these areas, majority of those people who were there were actually, not that they were all Igbos, so they were not all Igbos, but majority of the Igbos in those areas, they had to deny that they were Igbos. Like they were changing the name of their villages. Igbo Akiri, they changed it to Igbanke. Abi, is that not what he said? So this is also very crucial part of the Nigeria history to what you now have today. That people are fighting themselves. Their parents told them that they were not Igbos. They must never say they were Igbos. And you see these descendants fight other Igbos online. You know, they say, "We are not Igbos. Shut up, our history said we are Keneko of national." I say, oh, come on, man. Anyway, this is part of the dark history of Nigeria. All right, the divide and rule, the winner takes it all kind of a thing. This is the genesis. Isele Uku. This is the largest of the Western Igbo towns. That the town did not suffer major war damages was due to the singular devotion to community service, courage, and guidance of the founder of the Baptist mission in that part of Nigeria. Reverend Martin, a returning pilgrim from America, had served as a captain in the U.S. Army. On hearing of the inevitable advance of the federal troops towards Isele Uku, he made strenuous effort to contact the high command of the Nigerian Army. On making contact, he organized supplies from Isele Uku, Isele Ungbitime, Isele Azagba, Onitsha Olono, Ila, Ezi, and made them available to the federal troops. These supplies of vegetables, fruits, oranges, yams, gari, rice, etc. were made available on a regular basis to the federal forces who were then at Umunede. He also held regular logistical meetings with the agents of the advancing troops, to the extent that this well-known church leader became familiar and friendly with the top army commanders of the Federal Army long before they set foot on Isele Uku. Even then, when the federal troops started their eastern movement and arrived at Isele Uku on the Lagos-Asaba Road, the whole town was gripped with the fear of the unknown, and many ran into the bush. The federal advance into Isele Uku was preceded by a couple of mortar and artillery shots which landed in the town, causing minor damages. Dutifully, Dr. Martin, with the Iyase of Isele Uku, led a delegation to meet the advancing party just outside the town on the old Lagos-Asaba Road. On contact with the federal troops, Dr. Martins read a well-prepared address of welcome to the troops in English, Hausa, and Yoruba. So much was the cordiality and friendship that long after the Federal Army pushed down to Asaba, the reference premises remained a beehive of soldiers, and Commander personally visited Dr. Martin, and the two became great friends. Ogwashi Uku. The federal advance on the Umunede Ogwashi Uku axis through Aku Uku, Akumazi, Ubulu Uku was without major incidents. The Biafran troops withdrew to Olo, and many scared natives took to the bush and others moved eastwards. However, Sunday Idu and Uwafo Asia Diachi made very bad judgment by leaving their bush hideout. Asia Diachi had wanted to retrieve a file from his house, and Sunday decided to accompany him home. Incidentally, they were tied up and staked in front of the Idu's family house. Apparently, this house is the first house on the left-hand side as you approach Ogwachi Uku from Obulu. At close range and still protesting their innocence, these two Ogwachi Uku young men were blown apart by rapid fire. They were the first Western Igbo civilian casualties to die in that war. To this day, the bullet holes on the house clearly underscores the viciousness of the approaching army as it entered the first villages and towns of the Western Igbos. Meanwhile, Obi Izediuno, the Agbogidi of Ogwashi Uku with his Olinzeles, red cap chiefs, summoned a meeting and prepared to receive the federal troops at the palace. The advancing federal troops stopped at Abuano Market and sent a squad to ascertain the stand of the Obi and his subjects. This special squad relinquished all their offensive weaponry, artillery, armored cars, and moved to the palace with their rifles. At the entrance of the palace, the soldiers were welcomed with placards proclaiming one Nigeria. After those demonstrations for a unified Nigeria, the squad commander wanted to hear from the horse's mouth. Without Ogwashi Uku, he asked. The Obi replied, one Nigeria. One of the officers accused the Obi of hiding Biafran troops around the palace and wanted the Obi to leave his throne and identify the hiding places of the Biafran soldiers. The embarrassed Obi retorted by asking what part of Nigeria the officer hailed from, adding that if he were from Hausa land, for example, he should be aware of the royalty of the emir. If Yoruba, he dared not question the sanctity of the Oba, and with a straight face, he declared, as the Obi of Ogwashi Uku, I cannot leave my seat of authority. He also pointed out that he, the Obi, had children in the Nigerian army, superior in rank to that army officer before him. One other officer rose to calm the situation. So the officer then concluded that since their support was for one Nigeria, the drums should be beaten and let the people rise and celebrate. After the dancing session, the Nigerian federal troops started going back to the Abuano Market, their rendezvous, as the squad commander was returning with his men to relay to the commanding officer the concord and understanding reached with the Obi. His red cap chiefs and the people, they fell into Nigerian troops' ambush. These were Biafran troops' ambush. These were Biafran troops who were cut off from the Akwale locations as a result of federal push from Agbo. The battle took the life of that particular soldier who questioned the Obi for hiding Biafran troops in the surrounding bushes. The Biafran troops in that ambush was led by a native of Ogwachi Uku, known as Ogwo. The Nigerian troops reacted immediately. The noon ambush escalated into house-to-house hunt for Biafran soldiers and collaborators. The outgunned Biafran troops later withdrew to Ogbe Umu Okuni, Ogbenti Obi, with the intention of heading towards Ibusa. To this day, the town remained grateful to the kind disposition and discipline of Captain Sunday Sumbo of the Federal Army, who, by preventing the ambush fallout from degenerating into witch hunts, saved lots of people. The decisive battle was fought at the post office, Anichi Primary School, and Onoku's compound. The Agidiasis including prominent educationist Chief Anomuwo and Chief Rafua, were gathered and ordered a crawl on the ground and detained for hours. The Biafrans finally got their exit by firing in one direction to Ibusa, where they blew up the Obochi bridge. At the end of the day, civilian casualty figures were heavy on Onoku and Elumeze families. In fact, the Onoku family of Ogwachiuku suffered one of the greatest losses, a single family unit of that war. Before their mother, 6 brothers were lined up in a single file and shot in cold blood. Madam Onoku, who had never seen death at such close quarters, never recovered from that trauma. Overall, the federal government estimated number of civilians and soldiers that died in the battle for Ogwachiuku were more than 200. Many civilians fled to the bushes of Olo, Olodu, Ewulu, and Aniagbala. At Ibusa, the federal advance to Ibusa from Ogwachiuku Road was stalled by the construction of Obochi Bridge. However, the Diokpa of Ibusa, Chief Obimodi, and his Red Cap chiefs went down to the broken bridge to receive the federal troops. The chief courageously waded across the river and welcomed the advancing troops to Ibusa. From their uphill command locations, the chiefs brought forward the commander to see the extent of damage of the bridge. The federal troops moved back to Ogwachiuku, making a left flank towards Isele Azaba to Okpanam, Major Chukuma Nzegu's hometown. Quite interesting. What do you have here? You have the 2nd Division rose on, and the Western Igbos moved to the joint to join it, confront, or stay neutral. Kind of like I've got collections of pictures here. What is an Igbo man doing in a Nigerian army uniform in 1966? Colonel Adebayo was surprised by this young NCO, who later on the war progressed, was commissioned by the 14th Brigade. The young Igbo officer fought his way from Enugu to Onitsha and has since been promoted a general of the Nigerian army. Who's that? Otio. So there's some kind of like historical pictures here as well, like, you know, during the war. Some of them that you probably can't see. That is the Igbo man. That Colonel Adekunle, what is his name? 1 sec. Colonel Adebayo. I was wondering, how did an Igbo man remain in Nigerian army? This is the Igbo man. This is the colonel. Anyway, I think that's the end of the chapter 3. So do we still have time to read the chapter 4? You can get the copy of the book on Amazon. It's quite easier. Just go on to Amazon and, you know, you can order it. Blood on the Niger. It's called. So let's read chapter 4, and then we can then maybe stop it until next time. Until we get to Asaba, October 7, 1967. The death of Chukuma, Kaduna Nzeogu. Another quote. I'm one of those men who triumph or die. It's from Napoleon Bonaparte's last letter to the governor of Rome. The negative force of Chronology. So Major Chukuma Nzeogu's life and death had a tremendous impact on the events that led to the Biafran incursion into the Midwest. He was the most visible executor of the January 15, 1966 coup. In fact, he introduced the military into government in Nigeria. That incomplete operation and his partial success betrayed his cause and left many unsettled scores. Probably not in this century. The true Nzeogu story and what he represented would eventually be told. However, it is safe for now to say that the operational code name for January 15 revolution was Damisa, an Hausa word for leopard. He operated that night initially without arms. As a leader of a predominantly northern order ranks, he was to be blown up with the target if after 7 minutes he did not return to his men. He was prepared to sacrifice his life, provided the coup succeeded. The main objective of the coup was to release a prisoner and install him Prime Minister of Nigeria. In his mind, Nzeogwu believed at that point in history that Nigeria needed the services of Jeremiah Obafemi Awolowo. He had the early vision to identify with the leadership qualities of the greatest Nigeria presidents never had. The greatest president Nigeria never had, Awolowo. It was therefore a sad irony that the greatest distortion of the philosophy and concept of the January 15 uprising came from the Western press of Daily Times, The Sketch, and Tribune. Till he died, Nzeogwu bitterly resented the lazy research and lies that presented his coup as the Igbo coup. In his letters to his friend Olusegun Obasanjo, it was clear he was frustrated by those mistruths. In the East, Chronology, who was a negative force in that January 15 operation, considered Major Nzeogwu a potent threat and did not know what to do with him. In fact, while other January 15 officers were being released from the eastern prisons, Chronology kept Nzeogwu under lock until the University of Nigerian students openly demanded his release. Released from detention and disagreeing with secession, he flung himself into the battle with the characteristic candor for which he was respected by both friends and foes. Few days into Operation Touch, Chuma died at a time the army, which never gave him any command, launched into his state of origin. Among the frontline commanders of this invading brigade were Chukwuma's January 15 accomplices, namely Major Emmanuel Ifeajuna, Major Chukwuka, Captain Adeleke, Lieutenant Fola Oyewole, and of course the invading forces commander, Brigadier Victor Banjo. Here is, let me say something there for the sake of my listeners. You see, when Ojukwu and Ironsi, when they stopped the coup that was now known as the first Nigeria coup, the coup plotters were arrested, including Nzeogwu, Victor Banjo, Oyewole, Adeleke, Ademulegun, and all of these guys were arrested. But they were kept in prison in the eastern part of Nigeria. Remember, their intention was to cleanse Nigeria of the most corrupt First Republic politicians, the most divisive, tribalistic First Republic politicians, and save Nigeria from the trajectory of, tribal, ethnic, religious hatred that is now kind of like pervading the land. So when the Ojukwu that was pro-Nigeria ended up being the governor of the eastern Nigeria, appointed by Ironsi, and then the Igbos became the target in the north, which now led to the Biafra sort of struggle that, okay, we are living. So when Ojukwu released all these prisoners, right, some of them disagreed, but almost all of them disagreed with him. This wasn't their dream of breaking Nigeria apart. Their dream is to deal with the criminal politicians and keep Nigeria one. So now that this Ojukwu that fought to stop them from dealing with these politicians is now the head of the, we are breaking away. So they disagreed with him. There were those who kind of decided to work on this part so that with the intention that they could carry the revolution on and still invade Nigeria and complete their revolution, right? When Ojukwu released others, he didn't release Nzeogwu. When he finally released Nzeogwu, Nzeogwu became almost like, Nzeogwu openly disagrees with Ojukwu's Biafra. But he was not welcomed by Gowon, Nigeria, to the point that it was almost just useless in his hometown. So when the war broke out, this is the part, I think this is the part now. So when the war broke out, Ojukwu was not, Nzeogwu was not allowed to actually be a soldier. Nigeria didn't give him any chance to have weapons. Biafra didn't give him any. So it was just like in the middle. Nobody wanted him. But let me read this part. So it says here that headquarters, I think this is a secret letter that he wrote. Okay. Hang on. No. Okay. Anyway, here is the letter, by the way. It says, Headquarters Eastern Command. Number 9, Independence Layout. PMB 1126. Enugu. 9th of May, 1967. So, local leave officers. 1. In view of the political developments arising from the recent visit of the Conciliation Committee from the West and the Midwest, it has become necessary to redeploy all officers of non-Eastern origin in the Eastern Command. 2. Before this can be effectively organized, the officer concerned will proceed on local leave with effect from the date of this letter till further notice. While on leave, they will, of course, continue to make themselves available for ease of communication. Copy. Major C.K. Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu. Captain G.S. Adeleke. Lieutenant F.O. Olafimihon. Lieutenant O. Oyewole. Lieutenant A.N.C. Azubuogo. Lieutenant A.A.O. Egbiko. Is it not a matter of curiosity that this fighting leatherneck would die off in the northern sector of Nsukka, few days to an operation into his native state, with all his former intimate subordinates as top commanders? There was no doubt that if that expedition was commanded or taken over by him, the results and the entire history of the Nigerian Civil War could have been different. For example, Colonel Olusegun Obasanjo, Ibadan Garrison Commander's reluctance to accept Banjo's plea at any cost definitely would have been a different story. Obasanjo's trust in Chukwuma is beyond reproach. Furthermore, the Midwest Tattered Command would have welcomed Nzeogwu in their midst, and many of the multifaceted tribal groups in the state would have accepted the detribalized soldier. So last time I saw Major Nzeogwu, I saw Major Nzeogwu for the last time when he landed on the open field of Anglican Grammar School, Nsukka, by early June 1967. St. Teresa's, my school, and others had been closed down because of the war. I was to return to Cable Point, Asaba, shortly. He dismissed me by asking me to give his regards to his mother, who at that time was living at Jarrett Street at Cable Point. He was not ready for any further discussion as he already climbed into a waiting cream-colored 404 salon car, holding a large map in his left hand. He had no bodyguard with him in the plane or in the waiting car. The helicopter, which landed around 6 o'clock in the morning, did not wait for the car to move before it flew off. At that point in time, he was an itinerant officer, testified Chief Marcel P.U. Abonyi, one of the 2 Nigerian pioneer intelligence officers trained for combat intelligence and sabotage at the United Arab Republic before independence. Mr. Abonyi, then with the Biafran Army, was attached to the 53 Brigade defending the Nsukka sector. Chief Abonyi believed that Major Nzeogwu was killed while on a recess to locate the Nigerian position at Obolo, Afo. The second week of July 1967 was unimpeded. Federal advances from Amala to Obolo Eke and Obolo Afo towards Nsukka and OP Junction. The other hot axis was Leja, where Nzeogwu introduced the tactics of placing heavy machine gun on top of trees. surprise federal troops started destroying many trees on their war path. The federal captured of Amala and pushed towards Opi, alarmed Unzeogu. Anytime the Nigerian federal troops take over Opi Junction, then the war is over. He prophesied. He drew a map of Africa and stood on the strategic junction, emphasizing Opi's importance thus. 1. Opi is the connection between Chad and South Africa. 2. Opi links Agenebode, the southern state of Nigeria, with Okutu and Nsukka. Federal capture of Opi would enable it to reinforce both from the north and beyond, from the south through Agenebode in the Midwest. That, observed the former commandant of the Nigerian Infantry Training Corps, would be too much to contain. Chief Aboyi, formerly with the West African Frontier Force, WAF, and later the Nigerian Army, was during the war attached to the 53 Brigade of the Nigerian Army at Nsukka. He admitted that Unzeogu and Ifeanyi, being itinerant officers, visited the front and helped in organizing soldiers. However, as the pressure mounted by federal troops increased, Unzeogu took part in actual fighting. He took part and greatly stabilized the front at Ibagwa, Unko, and Obukwa theaters, where federal troops were pushing towards Nsukka from the Enugu-Ezike axis. Chief Aboyi, continuing on the death of Major Unzeogu, recalled that conflicting intelligence on the exact location of the Nigerian troops on the Obolo-Afo axis led to Chukwuma's death. Assessing two conflicting reports, one from the army, which located the Nigerian army still at Obolo-Eke, and the other, the police intelligence, which reported that the federal forces had moved into Obolo-Afo and Obolo-Eke. He said, in quote, "As the intelligence officers of the brigade, I had evidence to believe the police report, affirming that it was no longer safe for anybody to approach Obolo-Afo. The army report maintained that Obolo-Afo was still safe, and those Biafran troops that left the area moved in panic. I countered that apart from being unsafe, the Nigerian army there had consolidated their positions and were in trenches. Meanwhile, the Biafran army forward locations ran back in total disarray to St. Paul's schools, Gudu, abandoning Umudum, the next village to Obolo-Afo. The fleeting troops were complaining of ferrets and mortal attacks. It was at this time that my agent, who disguised as a Pawine Tapper, returned. As the intelligence officer in possession of the credible confirmation report from my agent, I passed on the proper position of federal troops at Obolo axis and briefed Unzeogu accordingly. The military intelligence countered this report and maintained that only a part of Obolo-Afo was in the hands of the Nigerian troops. They reported that Obolo-Afo AK Road was safe. I refuted this and maintained that the Nigerian troops had made their trenches before and after Abonye River. Under this conflicting report, Unzeogu set himself the task of finding out the correct position of the Nigerian troops. I explained to him that the federal troops were not only on the road, they were also inside trenches. He laughed and seemed to have agreed with me, and for a while made no comment. Suddenly, he woke up and demanded for volunteers. Tears came rolling down my cheeks. I looked at this magnificent, thoroughly bred pride of the Nigerian army and wondered why, on his last day on earth, he was condescend in a full combat camouflage uniform. I wondered why the defiant face cap was drawn to cover his eyes. Till this day, I cannot explain why Chukwuma Unzeogu did not want anybody to look at his face at that moment of ascension. While he was counting his volunteers, the death dialogue continued. So Unzeogu said, "Nothing will happen, Abonye. We are going. Abonye, why not ask me to draw my revolver and kill you on the spot, sir? I will tell Cornelese that you are gone. If you ever come back, I will give you a keg of palm wine. Chuma ignored me and faced his followers. Unzeogu, I'm not passing any orders. Who is ready to come with me? A driver and one young man put up their hands. He asked for 2 more volunteers, and many put up their hands. Unzeogu went into the armored car and, like an Israeli officer, sat in front with the driver. I went forward to talk with him again. There was nothing I did not do to stop him. Major Unzeogu shouted at me, Aboyi, I will soon lose my temper. Better leave me alone. So, death on Obolo-Afo Bridge. The armored car clambered on and passed the Obolo-Eke junction. At the bridge, at Obolo-Eke end, Unzeogu and the rest, and his rest party, obviously believing the army intelligence report, were trapped on that obstacle. A perfectly laid and organized federal ambush first of all concentrated fire on the tires of the armored cars. When the armored car was immobilized, they turned on the occupants. There were no survivors. The nature of Unzeogu's death made his body retrieval impossible. Even though he had no command and was not attached to the 53 Brigade, that is, the Biafran Brigade defending the Nsukka sector, I reported Chukuma Unzeogu's death to the brigade commander, then based at the health center, OP. Subsequently, the official report of his death was communicated to the officer in charge, Biafran Special Branch Enugu. The immediate impact of Unzeogu's death was devastating to the Biafran forces and led to the emotional loss of Nsukka and OP Junction, which, as he predicted, led to the eventual end of the war. Unzeogu once again united Nigeria at OP with his death. He was never a Biafran. In order to forestall this federal psychological victory, the Biafran radio was vehement that Chukuma Unzeogu was alive. But insiders in the Biafran army knew that he was gone and that something must be done to restore morale. Colonel Ojuku's green light for the Midwest invasion was the tonic, and with that move, the Midwest avowed neutrality was violated. So that is, that is the end of chapter 4. There's an offshoot note. Okay, it says, anyway, so we shall continue from chapter 5 next time. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, we are reviewing all these historical events. Okay, just so you know that there's a reason why they don't want us to remember them, read about them, or even teach them in your schools. Because those they call the heroes of Nigeria, they are villains. They are mostly criminals, genocidists, and the rest of that. And you see, the fact that people don't read their history makes them vulnerable enough or susceptible enough to repeat it. Nigeria, that is so divided more than ever right now, with this tribal, ethnic, and other profiling going on. If Nigeria has learned nothing from that bloody, needless civil war, there is a chance that Nigeria will fall again into that trap of another civil war if things continue the way they are right now. So if you fail to learn from your history, you are bound, right, to repeat it. Thanks very much for your time. Enjoy your afternoon. I'll see you later. Please, Sydney.
Maiyegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Maiyegun Diary, Maiyegun #1.
Maiyegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Maiyegun Diary, Maiyegun #1.
Maiyegun ti dé o. ọ̀rẹ́ ará ìlú.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
lórí Facebook lórí YouTube.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
gbogbo bó ṣe ń lọ ni Maiyegun já wa sí.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
àṣírí ọ̀jẹ̀lú kì í bò níbẹ̀ o.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
bó bá ṣe eré àní Maiyegun máa wí.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
ó sì tún ṣe eré wàá gbọ́ níbẹ̀ o.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
Maiyegun Diary Diary Politico.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
Godfatherism kò sí lọ́rọ̀ Maiyegun.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
ẹ farabalẹ̀ sẹ́ o kẹgọ́rọ̀ lẹ́nu o.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
àní Maiyegun làwa mọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Maiyegun Diary náà bí nọ́mbà 1.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé. Maiyegun ti dé.
ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
lórí Facebook
Maiyegun ti dé.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
lórí YouTube
Maiyegun ti dé.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
bọ́ bàbá gbé wúrẹ́
Maiyegun máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
jíjó ìgbádìyẹ
Maiyegun máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
pẹ̀sìdó bá rúfin o
Maiyegun máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
kí gómìnà kówó jẹ
Maiyegun máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
ọlọ́pàá tí ń darí bá
Maiyegun máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
aṣòfin tí ń rúfin o
Maiyegun máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
òkúra olóṣèlú
Maiyegun máa wí.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran o.
Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ o Maiyegun ó sọ pé wọ́n ò bẹ́ẹ̀ wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ Maiyegun ó sọ pé wọ́n ò bẹ́ẹ̀ oníkanṣá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe fáwọn ará ìlú tó gbé wọn débẹ̀ o àyè.
Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
ha kì máa yí ṣeré ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣẹ̀fẹ̀ kì máa yí ṣeré ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣẹ̀fẹ̀ ẹni bá ti lè lẹ́bọ̀ lẹ́rù o ọmọ bá dèrò kàṣàyè tú wọn síta.
Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
tẹnitẹni ọmọ Maiyegun ọ̀rẹ́ ara ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni mo fọlọ́hún sọ ẹ̀ bá kìlẹ́bù lóòótọ́ olódodo ìlú ọ̀tá ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni ìwọ ṣá máa ń ṣọ́ra kò sì mọ́ bẹ̀rù bọ́tà ń lè rí bóníṣègùn lé káwọn mọ̀mọ́ fi ṣera wọn ni ó ti dẹrùn tí wọn ò gbọ́dọ̀ sè mọ́bẹ̀. èèpo ọ̀gọ̀lọ́mọ bá dérò tàjẹ́ ò gbọ́dọ̀ jẹ́ ó ti dọba lórí àbínú ẹni kò sì mọ́ bùyà. àìsíwọ́lu ní ẹnìkẹ́ ìgbódì ẹyin lábàrá o ó kó ẹni tó bá dán o àkàmù. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lúwẹ̀ túnra kì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lúwẹ̀ túnra kì o. ẹni bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dèrò òní fi wọ́n níran o.
Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lúwẹ̀ túnra kì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lúwẹ̀ túnra kì. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ òní fi wọ́n níran.